So the trade deadline is coming up on Monday, August 31st. It's a weird season. There's not a lot of trades that are probably going to happen. Does Trevor Bauer move? Does somebody else move? It's still up for debate in a short season with weird pay and not a lot of games left. I don't know if we see any big names move, but we'll probably continue to see some minor names like Gerard Dice and Dan Vogelbach being traded. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about 10 trades that almost happened because, whoa, there are a ton of trades in Major League Baseball that would have completely changed the way we looked at the game, completely changed baseball history, but they didn't end up happening. So there's like 10 that I'm going to cover in today's video. I've got probably about 10 or 15 more, so if you want to see a part 2, make sure to leave a like. If we hit 3,000 likes on this video, I can give you a part 2 of 10 more trades that almost happened. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content. Always talking baseball over here, so click that sub button, join the team. Remember to get in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about these trades that almost happened. Like, which one do you think is the craziest? And don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, second channel. All the links to my social media are in the description as always. So yeah, let's talk about some of these trades because I'm not joking. They are wild. I don't think you're even expecting some of these. So the first trade that I'm going to talk about in today's video was between the Detroit Tigers and the Florida Marlins. Yes, the Florida Marlins at the time. 2005, Dontrelle Willis just came off a really strong year with the Marlins. 2.63 ERA, won 22 games, and the Tigers were like, oh, we want Dontrelle Willis. So much so that they offered Justin Verlander, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, one of the best pitchers that we've seen in the 2000s era, along with Curtis Granderson, who is a great player, multiple-time All-Star, one of the better outfielders of the 2000s, in exchange for Dontrelle Willis. In the end, the Marlins did not end up accepting this trade. The Marlins said, no, we're good, and we kind of know the story from there on out. I mentioned how good Verlander's been. He's won a Cy Young Award. He's won an MVP, won a World Series. I mean, the dude's an absolute stud. Curtis Granderson, 3-time All-Star, hit a ton of homers with the Yankees, had a great career, and Dontrelle Willis was really never ever good again after 2005. His career completely fell off, and they ended up having to trade him a couple years later for scraps. Imagine if the Marlins ended up trading Dontrelle Willis for Justin Verlander and Curtis Granderson. The future of that Marlins team would look a lot different, and the future for Verlander and Granderson's career would have looked so much different. I can't even imagine Verlander in a Marlins uniform. For the second trade, let's talk about the Yankees. Mariano Rivera, the greatest closer of all time. Well, he was almost traded 5 different times before he really became the big guy that he now is. And in 1996, George Steinbrenner agreed to a deal with the Seattle Mariners to send Mariano Rivera to them in exchange for veteran shortstop Felix Fermin. Yes, you heard that right. Mariano Rivera, the greatest closer of all time, only ever pitched for the Yankees, was almost traded for Felix Fermin. Luckily for you, Yankee fans, people inside the Yankees organization were able to talk Steinbrenner out of making that absolutely asinine trade, and you got to see Mariano Rivera be the greatest closer of all time, help you win 5 World Series championships, be the MVP of the 1999 series, and just become the greatest closer of all time. As for Felix Fermin, after that 1995-1996 season, he never played in baseball again. After 95, he went to the Cubs, played 11 games, and hit 125. So yes, the Yankees almost traded Mariano Rivera for a veteran shortstop, Felix Fermin. What? And that's not even the craziest trade. You're gonna have to wait to the end to hear the absolute most wild trade that almost happened. We remember A-Rod, one of the best players of all time. Did he take steroids? Yes, but in his time, he was pretty good. Well, in 2003, he was actually meant to go to the Boston Red Sox in a deal that would send Manny Ramirez and John Lester to the Rangers in exchange for A-Rod. Now, the White Sox were also supposed to have a side deal and it would help, piece it all together, but as we know, this deal never ended up happening. The Players Association vetoed the deal. A-Rod actually agreed to lose $30 million in that trade to go from the Rangers to the Red Sox, and the Players Association said no, and A-Rod ended up going to the New York Yankees. Can you imagine if A-Rod ended up going to the Red Sox? You would have A-Rod playing shortstop for the Red Sox, Derek Jeter playing shortstop for the Yankees. The storylines that would have came from those series would have been unbelievable. We wouldn't have seen A-Rod get thrown at, and Jason Varitek and the whole Don Zimmer thing with Pedro Martinez. I mean, the Red Sox and A-Rod had such a battle for a long time, and I think this is part of it. He was supposed to be a Red Sox, and it never ended up panning out. He went to the Yankees, went to the enemy, and he ended up helping them win some World Series. Now, the Red Sox did get the last laugh because, of course, they won a World Series in 2004, but still, imagine if these teams had A-Rod. They would be even better. But you are also losing Manny Ramirez and John Lester, who were integral parts of some of the World Series teams. Regardless, the idea that A-Rod could have been a Boston Red Sox instead of a Yankee is still one that baffles my mind because it just does, I can't see it. It's so weird to think about. Fourth trade today's video involves possibly one of the greatest players of all time, and that's going to be Albert Pujols. In December of 2000, the Expos and the Cardinals were making a trade. The Cardinals were receiving relievers Dustin Hermanson and Steve Klein, and were looking to move someone from their team in order to get them. At first, the Cardinals were offering Albert Pujols, but the Expos ended up turning it down and didn't end up picking Pujols and instead went with Fernando Tatis, yes, the father of Fernando Tatis Jr., because they wanted a player who had more experience. At the time, Albert Pujols was a youngin'. So the Expos could have had Albert Pujols in exchange for 2 relievers who were never even the best at their position. We're talking about one of the greatest players to ever play the game, the machine. Could have been in Montreal. Would his career look different? Probably. But I mean, he's a 10-time All-Star, 3-time MVP, won multiple World Series championships. If he went north of the border, imagine what Albert Pujols could have done for that Montreal Expos team. Instead, they got Fernando Tatis and Britt Reams. For argument's standpoint, you know, Tatis had a pretty terrible career with the Expos. In 3 seasons, hit .225 with a .662 OPS, and Britt Reams wasn't much better, a 5.53 ERA in 164 and a third innings with a 1.6 whip. Yeah, you should have taken Albert Pujols, Montreal. Generational talent. This next trade hits home because it's about my New York Mets. In 2003, the Mets were looking to make a trade with the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays really screwed this one up because the Mets were looking to get Jose Cruz Jr., who was pretty terrible, and the guy they were looking to trade was David Wright. Now, GM of the Blue Jays at the time, JP Riccardi, really stuck his foot in his own mouth here when he turned down David Wright, and not only turned him down, badmouthed him, saying that they didn't want someone potentially from a league that he considered to be the Sally League. We obviously know what David Wright's career ended up becoming. 7-time All-Star. He was a Mets captain, Captain America. Had it not been for injuries, he probably would have been a Hall of Famer, but obviously injuries shortened his career. And as for Jose Cruz Jr., well, from 2003 onward, Jose Cruz Jr. had a 761 OPS, ended up leaving in free agency, signing with the Giants, and just didn't have a great career, 761 OPS. So, you know, the Mets tried their hardest to screw it up, take one of the best players, if not the best player in their organization history offensively, and almost traded him for Jose Cruz Jr., but thank goodness for JP Riccardi, who denied it and said, no, we don't want David Wright. Thank you, JP, I appreciate you. You know what, let's stick on the topic of the New York Mets. There is another huge player that almost got moved, this time to the Mets, and that would have been Ken Griffey Jr. Yes, Ken Griffey Jr. was almost traded to the New York Mets instead of the Cincinnati Reds. Steve Phillips was hot and heavy for him. Ken Griffey Jr., not so much for the Mets, and I get it. So in 1999, the Mets were looking to make a move, and they were going to grab Ken Griffey Jr. along with some other players. But in this move, they were going to be trading Armando Benitez, Jay Payton, Octavio Dotel, Roger Cedeno for Ken Griffey Jr. Again, another generational talent. We obviously know what happened in Ken Griffey Jr.'s career: 13-time All-Star, 7-time Silver Slugger, 10 Gold Gloves, Hall of Famer, one of the best players to ever play the game of baseball. The guys mentioned in the trade: Armando Benitez, not very good. Jay Payton didn't really turn out to be much. Octavio Dotel, he was a closer, and Roger Cedeno was a huge bust. So the Mets almost were able to get one of the best players of all time for nothing. It's just Ken Griffey Jr. didn't want to come to New York, and I can't blame him. He wasn't a big fan of the big city like that. But imagine if they had Griffey and Mike Piazza on the same team in 1999 going into the 2000 World Series against the Yankees. I have a feeling things would be a lot different for me as a Mets fan. Unfortunately, we are still losers. We still don't win anything in my lifetime, and Ken Griffey Jr. never played a game for the Mets. So the 7th trade of today's video involves the greatest player of all time, in my opinion, Barry Bonds. Yes, I know, steroids. He's still a beast. Look at his numbers. Unbelievable. Steroids don't make you that kind of player. So Barry Bonds, as we know, left the Pirates in free agency, signed a huge contract with the Giants, and became the greatest player of all time. But the Pirates were actually trying to trade him before he hit free agency, and this trade is wild. He almost went to the Atlanta Braves in exchange for Alejandro Pena, Keith Mitchell, and a player to be named later. Imagine including a player to be named later in a trade for Barry Bonds, who at the time with the Pirates was still incredible. I feel like people forget Barry Bonds won 2 MVPs with the Pirates and finished second in 1991. He was no slouch. He was still having OPSs above 1,000. Dude was one of the best players, if not the best player in baseball at the time, and the Pirates almost traded him for nothing. You want to take a look back at some of the guys they would have gotten? Whoa, Alejandro Pena was a decent reliever, but again, a reliever for Barry Bonds. And Keith Mitchell only ended up getting like an extra 50 at-bats in his career after that season. Didn't live up to the expectations. Was a bit of a shell of his cousin Kevin Mitchell, and they almost got Barry Bonds for those two guys. The greatest player of all time. I mean, I hate the Braves as a Mets fan, but I can only imagine how much I would have hated them if they also had Barry Bonds. That blows my mind. Thank goodness this trade never happened. Trade number 8, Pedro Martinez to the Cleveland Indians for Jarrett Wright and Bartolo Colon. Now, of course, the Expos originally had Pedro Martinez. He wasn't a Boston Red Sox to start his career, and the Expos were obviously looking to shop him. After losing a series to the Marlins in 1997, the Indians were looking to get some pieces, get some players, and they came knocking on the door of the Montreal Expos. They were going to trade Jarrett Wright and Bartolo Colon for the Cy Young winner in the National League, Pedro Martinez. Now, Bartolo Colon was a good pitcher at the time, so it's not completely ridiculous, but the idea that Pedro Martinez almost got traded to the Indians and wouldn't have been a Red Sox, imagine what that would have done to the history of baseball. I mean, think of all the historic moments he had on the Boston Red Sox mound, pitching against the Yankees, calling them his daddy, winning Cy Youngs, having possibly the best pitching season in MLB history. That wouldn't have happened with the Red Sox. It could have happened with the Indians. It might not have even happened. Who knows? Luckily for the Red Sox and for the Expos, it fell apart at the last minute, and Cleveland ended up not getting Pedro Martinez. Now, Bartolo Colon found his way into the Expos, but that was in a different trade later on, just not for Pedro Martinez. So Indians fans, I mean, you blew a 3-1 lead in the World Series, and you also blew a Pedro Martinez trade. Sorry, guys. You're about the only people who I can feel more sympathy for than Mets fans myself. Now, for the penultimate trade, because the 10th one, wow, it's a doozy. But the penultimate one, we got Jose Bautista being traded to the Phillies for Dominic Brown. Now, maybe that doesn't get you out of your seat, maybe that doesn't get you going crazy, but when you remember how good Jose Bautista was with the Blue Jays and how poor of a career Dominic Brown had, you went, wow, I can't believe this trade almost happened. Now, Dominic Brown was a very, very highly touted prospect when he was younger. younger. He was expected to be the next big thing in Philadelphia, and I remember as a Mets fan being like, oh my god, they're gonna add this guy to that lineup with Howard and Utley? Well, they almost cashed in, and it would have been a great trade because Dominic Brown, like I said, didn't end up doing much in his major league career, and Jose Bautista went on a tear. The trade was rumored to go down in 2013, which would have been the tail end of his career. His prime for Jose Bautista was really 2010 and 2011, where he hit 54 and 43 homers, but even still, after 2013, 35, 40, 22 homers. I mean, Bautista was still a very productive player offensively, and Dominic Brown was not. Dominic Brown only ended up playing until 2015, and then he was out of baseball. And besides 2013, where he was an all-star and had a phenomenal year, 14 to 600 OPS, 15 to 600 OPS, he was a bust. So while this might not be the most crazy trade, it is a trade that almost happened, and the Phillies could have had Jose Bautista. Again, I would have hated that as a Mets fan. And then last, but certainly not least, we have the craziest trade ever that almost happened. Ted Williams of the Boston Red Sox was almost traded to the New York Yankees for Joe DiMaggio. Yes, I'm gonna repeat that because just think about how crazy this sounds. The Boston Red Sox almost traded Ted Williams to the New York Yankees for Joe DiMaggio. Apparently, after the 1947 season, the Yankees coming off another World Series win while the Red Sox just missed out, Yankees owner Dan Topping and Red Sox owner Tom Yawkey met at a bar and agreed in principle to send DiMaggio to the Red Sox for Ted Williams. To put it into perspective, that would be like Mike Trout being traded for Mookie Betts right now. Or even more ridiculous, if Mookie Betts was still on the Red Sox and they traded him for Aaron Judge, because you gotta remember the Red Sox and the Yankees were competing with each other. At least if Trout and Betts were traded right now, they're going to different leagues. But the idea that Williams and DiMaggio could have been swapped, Williams could have been a Yankee, DiMaggio a Red Sox, that blows my mind. Like, that's just so insane. Now, obviously, this trade never happened because both of the owners slept on it and were like, wait, we don't want to give up either of these guys. Why would we do this trade? And for the Red Sox, you know, you still got one of the best hitters of all time. You just didn't win many more World Series. And for Joe DiMaggio and the Yankees, they continue to be incredible. This trade probably would have been the best trade, though, of all time, as in a win-win. You get two Hall of Famers, two of the greatest players of all time being traded for each other in division, in the same league. I just can't even imagine this. Like, imagine if Ted Williams got traded for Joe DiMaggio. I don't think we can underestimate how crazy that would have been. Put it in 2020 perspectives. Imagine what the articles, imagine how many views I'd get on that trade breakdown. You know what? Let's see a trade like that. Let me get those views. Regardless, DiMaggio for Ted Williams, without a doubt, the craziest trade that almost happened. So those are 10 trades that almost happened in Major League Baseball. I mean, Joe DiMaggio for Ted Williams, Ken Griffey Jr. almost going to the Mets, Mariano was almost traded. This stuff is insane. Imagine if these trades went down, how different baseball would look right now. But yeah, those are the 10 trades that almost happened in Major League Baseball. If you want to see a part 2, because we got more trades to talk about, remember to leave a like, 3,000 likes, and I will give you a part 2. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you like the content. On our way to 200K. Get in the comment section down below. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, second channel, Twitch. Links as always in the description. That's gonna be it for today's video. So many crazy trades, even more to talk about. You know the drill from here on out. YouTube recommends you watch this video as well as this is my most recent upload. So click through those if you have not yet seen them. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow for another video. Bye. Mariano was almost traded.